Okay. All right, recording's underway. So this is the culture of the people attending today. And we've had this before where we've had as many people driven to avoid the complete drive. But again, good representation of all drives. This is just for those of you who are new to the call. Every time we work with a group, we always look at, well, obviously an individual or a group, we always look at the ID as to then what adjustments do we make to how we deliver to accommodate. And you can see today, there's the majority of people are avoid complete, which probably makes sense given this what the call's all about. The other place that we always start is to just self-check, where are we in relation to our own ID? At the end of the day, if we're going to be the best version of ourselves and contribute our greatest, to the world, it's going to be by being in stride and being true to who we are. And that green arrow up the middle of the page represents your ID. And there are forces that can pull you off track, whether that's, your career or your relationship or family, quote unquote values that have been, drilled into you over the years. There are things that even voluntarily we can do that pull us off track, let alone what other people can do to us. But what do we need to do to be really in stride with our ID? And on our scale of 0 to 10, 10 being where you're really in stride, 1 being where it's, you're completely demotivated. Where are you today? And what we found is that people who are an 8, 9, or 10 are the ones who are casting the best shadow to be effective themselves and to positively influence the world around them. And if you are a 4 or less, it needs action. So when we're working with employers, if someone on their team was a 4 or less, we would say they're a flight risk. Frankly, if they were a 2, they probably already have flown. I spoke to someone yesterday, and there's things going on in their lives where they said, well, I'd be a 2 right now. And the health issues that are occurring and the career issues are provoking a change that they can't deny. Your health will get to a point where it says, well, if you're not going to pay attention, I will make it happen. And so I think it's a really great little exercise to do each and every day, and to get to know how do you get in stride, everything from, what you're doing for the day to what clothes you wear, which way you drive to work, what time you start work, what the routines are so that you can get off and running on the right foot. All of those things make a massive difference. And it's all part of the self-awareness that the best leaders in the world pay attention to each and every day. So I think this is a great little exercise to do. We do it every time we're working with a client or a team, but I would commend it to you every day. Okay, today we're going to talk about the avoid complete drive, and I'm just going to give you a snapshot here before we then do a deeper dive into all of the different attributes. So last week I showed you exactly the same slide, but the focus was on what's above the midpoint here in terms of the drive to complete and all of the attributes. So this is just to give you a snapshot. And what I've done here is I've compared each of those 5 bullet points to each other. So if the energy of an avoid complete person builds up over time with momentum, it actually reduces very quickly over time for an avoid complete. So I actually drew this for you to show you, excuse my handwriting, but it was just the quickest way to show you this, that if you look at energy being this, the vertical axis, and time being the horizontal axis, a completer's energy builds up over time. And so they may not look that enthusiastic when they're starting, because there can often be doubts as to whether we're actually going to stay with this and follow it through, whether there'll be the tenacity, whether there'll be the resources to follow through and actually bring it in for a landing, even just the time to stay with it long enough to complete it. Whereas at the start of something, at the very beginning, that's when the energy of an avoid complete person is highest, and it dissipates over time. And so it depending on whether you're like a 4 incomplete, which might be this person out here, a 3 incomplete, a 2 incomplete, the time that you have before the energy runs out gets shorter and shorter. And I just put here 5 minutes down here for the shortest time, because I'm saying 5 minutes, but 5 minutes being a glance, no scroll bar, 1 line, it's got to be like immediate. And so when we think about people's energy running out, I don't mean over the course of days or weeks. I'm talking minutes. Literally when you see an email, for an avoid complete person, when they see an email with a scroll bar, they'll think, okay, give me another, let me look at another email. they actually intended to do with that email until they saw the scroll bar, or they opened it and they saw how long it was, and straight away that little gremlin inside where the energy runs out just went, I've run out, I'm done, I'm moving on to the next thing. So whereas a completer would gradually get into it, they wouldn't get into it unless they had the time to get right into it and deal with it all the way through. And as they do that, then the momentum builds up. So I just thought I'd share that visual with you so that it maybe gives you a perspective on the time and energy relationship between the completer and the avoid complete drive.
Paul, is it too early for a story?
Go.
So I'm a 2 incomplete, and I have worked with WebEx, which I love, for years. And on the WebEx platform, you log in, and then it calls your phone, and you have to answer, and that's how you link into the audio. And I can not tell you the number of times that I have said, please call me. And then I've started taking a note or writing a text or an email, and the phone rings, and I literally think, oh, someone's calling me.
Yeah. That's a fantastic example of how quickly you move on.
Yep, on to next.
Totally, already gone. Great. All right. I think the others here are pretty self-explanatory. So I have this model to work through. I've shared this with some of you before, where I'm going to unpack the drive with each of these different categories, and work these through with you today, and take questions and comments. I mean, I've got a bunch of things to share, but I'm, like Alona just did, very interested to hear your stories. They make it more real for everybody. So with that, I will stop sharing so everyone can see the screen, see each other more easily. And I'll try and watch the chats as well, and Ian will call things out to me. All right. So if we start with motivation, and what do you need to motivate yourself? The first thing that comes up is it's got to be short and sweet. If anything you're going to do is too long-winded, it's hard to get motivated. So the first thing is chunk it up. Look at what can I do that is just an immediate or very quick impact or result, so that I can see that I'm it's not so much making progress, just getting results. It's a drive that's driven to get results. So just the things that take the shortest amount of time would be where I would suggest you start. The other thing that often comes up is a cause. Whereas we talk about, say, verifiers needing to know why, it's the avoid complete people who tell us, what I need to get motivated is I need a cause. I need something I really believe in that's like a mission or a cause. How I get there and what I do may vary over time, but I need something that's got like an end goal that I can really believe in and connect to, and then I'm motivated. But there needs to be a cause that there's a real, passion around to get yourself motivated. And then, of course, just having short-term goals and milestones along the way, partly also to keep you on track. They're the things that the avoid completes need to really get motivated. Now, there's a lot of avoid completers. When we talk about completers being the planners and needing to plan or needing a plan, there's a lot of avoid complete people say, but I do a lot of planning. And what I've noticed over the years is, yes, they do, or me too. We plan, but we don't plan to follow the plan. We plan to know where to start. Like, of all the things we've got to do today, I put a list together and I can see where I need to start. But that list has got no bearing on what I'm actually going to do today. That's just how I'm going to get started today. And the number of times you make your list, which could be in your own mind, and then somebody calls and says, do you want to do this now? And you're like, oh, great. That sounds good too. And you immediately pivot and change. And so, that's one of both the strengths of that drive is your ability to be flexible and pivot on a dime. And equally, the vulnerability is that you're very easily distracted. For kids these days in school, where we think about, well, not just kids really, but adults too, having ADD, and having worked with many children with ADD, it can happen for all drives. But I think the one that personifies ADD is the avoid complete drive, because like Alona said, we just get distracted so quickly and easily, rather than staying focused just because it's the plan.
Paul, do you think those who are little perfectionists also are weaker in this area because of that perfection drive in yourself? You want to make sure everything's done, and you procrastinate a little bit more.
It comes from other drives, Tarek, and we wouldn't normally call. Are you saying that the avoid completes would be perfectionists or would not be perfectionists?
They could be. They could be, because I, to a degree, was that a bit of a perfectionist, want to get everything right, and then now I'm gradually moving away from that and saying, okay, if I get 70% right, that's a win.
Yeah, and what's your ID?
473. Where are we?
Okay,
I forgot
B
my
or
last
3.
one.
Yeah,
I'm a 3. Yes.
It's not that you can't be a perfectionist on something that you really care about, but the people that have the reputation for being a perfectionist are typically up on the first 3 instincts and down on the last. So someone like Andy, 7672. Andy, do you either see yourself or are you known as a perfectionist, would you say?
I would say no. I'm more of a done, not perfect type of individual, but I will say that I worked at getting to that point. When I was younger, I know that I very much wanted to make sure I got things right, but I feel like that was more because I was trying to avoid the risk of getting it wrong. So it was more on the improvise side.
Okay. Yeah, so it's certainly not the world of the avoid complete person to be known for having that particular strength. They're known for getting things started. I mean, at the end of the day, if you think about completers are the ones who will stay with something over time. The real talent and strength of the avoid complete is to be the catalyst, to be the initiator of things. And I know we can be judged for not getting things done, but where you want to really put your emphasis is on what you're able to instigate and breathe into action, breathe into life. That's the real hallmark of the avoid complete world. One of the things that you also need in terms of being motivated is to understand the non-negotiables. I'm saying you need to understand this as an avoid complete, but those of you who are leading, whether you're avoid complete or not, leading other people who are avoid complete, you need to be really clear for them on what are the non-negotiables, because the avoid completes are the ones who are going to bend the rules. And what they will tell you is, yes, I want to bend the rules, but I hate finding out in retrospect that those rules were non-negotiable. If I'd have known that, I would have paid attention to that rule. So which rules are rules that can be bent and which rules are going to bite me in a way that I don't want to be bitten? I need to know those rules. So think about on a soccer game, there's certain things that are a red card, and for that you get sent off as opposed to just being penalized and somebody getting a free kick. There's plenty of people that will give away a penalty because it's a strategy actually to winning the game, but they don't want to give away a red card and get sent off the field. And so understanding which of the rules are absolute non-negotiables and which are rules that are sort of more optional, that's a really important part of setting up an avoid complete person for success. That is a crucial discussion. So when someone says, "Oh, give me a set of my roles and what's my role and the responsibilities, so I'm clear on expectations," the real thing you want to call out is, and of those expectations, which are the non-negotiables? And there won't be many. There might only be like 3 or 4. I think of it as like the boundary of a soccer field. There might only be 3 or 4 rules that make up the boundary for that person. So just get clear on those. They're not going to remember 15 non-negotiables, but they will remember, 3 or 4, especially if you can put them into an acronym or something like that, simple to remember. You've got a much better chance of helping that person really succeed. Okay, so I'm going to move on and talk. If they're the things that you need to be motivated, what demotivates you? Scroll bars for sure. Email scroll bars. They just or seeing any large number. So when you imagine you're sitting through a slide presentation and you see down the bottom left-hand corner when the presenter is setting themselves up, there's 67 slides. Instantaneously, you're demotivated. You just sit there thinking, there is no frigging way I'm going to sit through 67 slides. So that little gremlin inside you is already getting itchy. And if you have got 67 slides in the deck and you're the presenter, one of the best things you can say straight away to the audience is, "Hey guys, I've got a lot of slides here. I'm not going to use all these slides. I'm actually only going to show you 3 or 4 slides, but I've got some here in case if you ask questions, I want some backup. I've got them here. That's why the deck." Just explain it, and it relaxes the avoid complete gremlins straight away. They do not want to be walked through a long-winded presentation. Whether it's presentation, whether it's emails with a scroll bar, anything that's long-winded. Someone saying to you, can I get 2 hours of your time? It's like, 2 hours? I haven't got 2 hours. And of course you've got 2 hours, but everyone's got 2 hours. But the little gremlin, the avoid complete gremlin inside you needs to hear 5 minutes, or have you got a sec, or have you got a minute? You've always got a minute, and you can always then create more minutes. But you want to think in those really short-term timeframes like that. So if you want the attention of an avoid complete, don't tell them you've got 15 things you need to cover and you need 2 hours of their time. Just say, if you've got a minute, I've got something I want to chat to you about. It sounds informal, it sounds fast, and then if they're engaged, you know, you can get more time. Or think about, of the 15 things, what's the one thing I could talk about that if I get that resolved, it covers the other 14. And that puts the pressure back on you, in whether you're an avoid complete or not, working with another avoid completer, of how do I make this faster? But I can tell you there's so many meetings I've gone into, and so long as I deal with that one thing, I get that sorted, everything else falls into place. But that's, you know, often requires some pre-work. The thinking that goes into it is to get it down to that, you know, that 1 or 2 things that can be covered, that we can cover, and then covers everything else. Okay, any questions or comments? I love seeing the chat. Looks like you guys have got your own meeting happening over here on the side, and I'm just talking to a brick wall. You know, it's great to see the interaction over here. You know what that is? That's the avoid completes saying, I'm not going to listen to him go on all the time. I'm just going to have my own meeting over here and be really defiant.
No, we're thriving off what you're saying, and I know for me personally, I have some camera problems. That's the reason why I'm not on camera. My apologies, but I thrive off of what you're saying, because you're helping me understand who I am a bit better, and why I do some of the things I do that even aggravate me. So it's good to know.
Thanks, Craig. Well, one of my golden rules is don't give vulnerabilities without giving strategies. You know, when I'm talking to you about things like scroll bars on emails, you know, it's not that I'm giving permission to everyone who's an avoid complete to say, okay, any email that's got a scroll bar or any presentation that's got 67 slides in it, you've got permission to get bored and sort of leave the room. There are strategies you can use. So for example, with the scroll bar, right? I've got a friend of mine in Queensland who's a genius at one word and one line responses to things. So when he sees a long email, it could be as simple as saying, can you give me a quick call? And it's off his plate. You know, he's done. And he hasn't even read the email. He just sees and goes, I'd rather talk about it. Says, can you give me a quick call? The person probably receives his response thinking, oh, good, he's read it, ready for a call. And when they then talk, he'll just say, they'll say, have you read it? No, I haven't read it. Just quickly tell me about it. And they deal with it all there, and then it's done, and he's able to move on. And he's just brilliant at how quickly he's able to deal with issues, how responsive he is. But he's the master of the one-line response, or thank you, or that's fine with me, or great job. You know, everything's down to one line. And I think if you just look at some of these long-winded things and think, what's the one word or one line response I can give that honors and responds to the other person, but doesn't cause me to procrastinate, because you'll never come back to it. I mean, that's the problem with the list. One of the strategies we have for the avoid complete drive is do it now or die. So either respond straight away or it ain't gonna happen. It just annoys the crap out of people to, you know, have to come back to a list. The best way is deal with it, and it's done. All right, let's talk about some of the...
I think with this email situation, I think this is very classic for me. When I have 10 or 12 emails which just sort of pumping in, you have to respond to them. That's when you lose your energy, when you see this long email come in and you wonder, you know, did we not discuss this at our meeting last week?
Yeah.
You bring all of these back. So that's where the energy dissipation in my instance occurs. But
right, when
I do try and prioritize these emails to complete, as you said, you know, there are times when I just forget because I get to the end of the day and that's it. You know,
well, yeah. One strategy is don't deal with it. Ignore it. I mean, there are many, and I'm not saying that's the right, I'm just saying what a lot of people do is they just go, you know what, I didn't ask for this email. And it's not really, you know, we have already dealt with it. If they really want me, they'll come back to me. And they don't feel, there are some people that feel this enormous pressure to clear their inbox every day. And there are other people that just go, I'll deal with what I'm, you know, what I need to deal with, but just because I've been emailed, if people really want me, they'll come back to me some other way, you know. Or you give a very quick response and move on.
Yeah,
I think that's mastering that is really important from a self-management and motivation point of view, and also sharing with your team or people who work with you, how do you work with emails and how do you want them to work with you so that you don't just get sort of cluttered up with it all.
Hey Paul, I just want to call out something Andy raised in the chat about making don't get things done on the call that might get punted. So that giving the permission to chase.
Yes, there was some echo then. You know, I couldn't quite hear what you were saying. I don't know where the echo is coming from. I think what you're saying was giving people permission to hound you. Is that? Yeah. So that word, by the way, to hound you, can someone's got an echo happening? Is it me? No.
That's got it.
The strategy. One of the strategies we give for avoid complete people is to hound them. And it sounds like a negative word, but I can assure you all the avoid completes thrive on being hounded. And they all turn around every time we give that in like a leadership report as a strategy to work with them. Every one of them goes, oh, thank you. Yes, please chase me. You know, we don't like letting people down and we know we get distracted. So come and ask and chase and hound us. It doesn't offend an avoid complete person. So use that strategy. It's so simple, and you can even use the word and say, well, I'm hounding you. The person goes, great, thank you. Thank you. And sometimes you need to be hounded 4 or 5 times before you eventually do it. But there comes a point where you go, I'm just going to get that thing done. And you wouldn't have if you didn't get hounded. Okay. Let's talk about some of the strengths of this drive. And there are obvious strengths like, you know, being a pioneer and given that if a completer works best with a plan and with instructions and knowing how to do things, the avoid complete is the person who just wants to dive in and get started. And whether there's instructions or not, whether there's prior knowledge or not, they just will figure it out. So that strength of experimenting, pioneering. I actually had a friend of mine yesterday said, you know, if I can see a pathway somewhere, I won't take that pathway. I would rather cut a new path. And it's the fun, it's the, you know, new learnings that might open up from that. And you can think, why are you doing that? It's already been done before. And there are times when they will, of course, use what they've done before. But there's actually a real energy around carving a new path, that pioneering spirit of the avoid complete person. But it's what it is it's a need to always want to do something different, to whether that's different to what you've ever done or what everyone else is expecting. It's the part of you that wants to stand out. So the little piece of the jigsaw puzzle that just wants to stand out from the crowd. So doing things that are the exception, that honor the exception, that customize things for people so that they feel they're getting exceptional service rather than standard regular service and treatment. That's one of the real strengths, is that when an avoid complete person is dealing with others, they feel like they're getting customized response, customized attention, customized solutions, you know, because you tailor it all to suit that moment in time, that person in time, which can be incredibly inefficient if you've already done it before. And some of you know a lady called Michelle that used to be supporting me. And the number of times I'd be doing something and she'd be like, Paul, we've already done that. It was like 6 months ago, 12 months ago, and I've completely forgotten all about it. Even when she started talking about it, I still had no memory. And when she would call it out and show me, it's like, oh my God, that just saved me hours of time of reinvention that I had completely moved on from, you know? So dealing with the exceptions, I often think about, you know, the analogy I'd use is like a doctor where you've maybe got an ailment and you've seen 3 or 4 other health practitioners and no one's been able to diagnose it. And you come in and present to an avoid complete doctor and they hear all the same, you know, pain points. They go, yeah, I know it sounds like an autoimmune disease, but I don't know, I'm just going to try this over here. And they bring like that lateral thinking to the table and they try a very different, unique, customized type approach that's maybe, if it's not breaking the rules, it's maybe bending the rules, or it's doing something out of left field that no one else would normally do. And in doing that, they find the solution that maybe others look straight past. You know, I think of there's a neurosurgeon in Australia who's renowned as a maverick, and he will do the surgeries that no one else is willing to tackle. And he's got he's got both a maverick and hero reputation with some people, and there are others, particularly amongst his own profession, who would really query him. And in fact, I was at an awards night one night where he received, after 30 years in his profession, he got an award, and he said to me, it's the first award I've ever received from my peers, because he's seen as so left field. And yet there are many people who are alive today because he was willing to push the boundaries on, on what his peers would not normally consider. And I think that's a great example of one of the strengths of the Avoid Complete Drive. The other one that I would just call out, and this is a simple strength, but I just think this is really worth calling out. You're really approachable. When a completer is in the middle of something, they do not want to be approached or interrupted. And even if they give you time, because there's a part of them that wants to be the peacemaker and give harmony, and so they're sort of saying, yes, how can I help you? Really, they don't want to be doing, like, there's something that says, I don't want to be interrupted right now. But the Avoid Complete person, because they're so flexible and so into whatever is happening in the moment, when you interrupt them or when you want their time, like, you're fully there. So it's this ability to be genuinely in the moment, present to that moment, fully there for that person, not distracted by anything else. That's one of the real talents, that people feel they can come and have a chat to you, and you'll drop things and be there with them because you're wherever you are. You're not distracted by the plan for the rest of the day or something that might have happened 10 minutes ago. You're right there in the moment. And I think that's worth knowing and having some confidence in, about, the effect you can have for other people, being that approachable. Okay, if they're the strengths, let's talk about the vulnerabilities. So Alona mentioned one before. Actually, I might stop there first and just say, does anyone have any questions or comments other than what's in the chat?
One of my questions is, Avoid Complete, how do they measure success if they can be distracted and be in the moment? How would they measure success?
We knock stuff off our list. Knock it off.
Thanks,
knock
Jessica.
it off the list.
Yeah, so like for me as an Avoid completer, it's like there's the thing I'm working towards, and there's all of the goalposts necessary to reach that. And so long as I hit those goalposts as I expect, then I'm feeling fine. Like, I need checkpoints that define when I've gotten past it, and then I need the acceptance criteria for the next checkpoint, and I don't really care. I'll figure out what I need to get there, and I'll just go. But I need to see that. I need to see the finish line, and I need to see that I've crossed a finish line. That's how I measure success. And it's like, what that finish line is, I don't care. I'll get there.
Yeah, like Nate, I mean, I'm Avoid Complete, and I hate analysis paralysis and endless discussions that yield nothing. So a lot of times if a project is going on and I feel like, we're not getting any closer to the end, I will literally ask, what is the path to completion? Like, what does completion look like? And what's the path to get there? Because if I can see the path, then you have milestones that you can measure along the way. But,
the irony of this drive, I should have maybe mentioned this right at the start. When I first developed the ID and spoke about complete and avoid complete, and we still get it to this day, there's often a real allergic reaction to the notion of avoid complete, because people think it's one drive is the drive to get things finished, and the avoid complete is the drive that doesn't get things finished. And yet, particularly in the business world, the people who have got the reputation for, excuse my language, but getting shit done is how they would call it, right? The people who have that reputation are the avoid complete people. And at first I'm like, that's interesting. How does that work? And what I found was, it's not that they get things finished, it's they get things started, and in getting them started, they get them done. So many things, as long as you get them started, like if you make a phone call, it's done. You don't start a phone call and then have to come back and finish a phone call. It's done. If you do an email, you start it, you finish it, it's done. Yes, there might be things like writing a book, where you start a book and then you've only written a few pages, you've got to come back to it. But so many things, by starting them, you actually get them completed. And that's why and shortening them down so they can be done quickly is what the avoid completes are masters at, you know. So the irony is the avoid completes often are the ones who have the reputation for being the completers, as it were, the finishers, even though that's not the only element of that drive. I think it's worth calling out the subtlety of that, the irony of that's how it plays out for most people, is that the reputation for completion and getting stuff done often sits with the avoid completes.
Excuse me, Paul. I'm just wondering if that kind of irony is because we don't have the cause of getting something started, and that's why we don't actually get it finished. Would that be the right way to see this?
I missed what you said, Claudia. Can you just say it again?
Sorry, I'm just wondering about that irony that we don't seem to show results. Is that because we don't see a cause of getting something started, and therefore that's why we don't finish it? So it essentially, what we should get started isn't of interest to us.
That could be part of it. I think that could be part. Sometimes it just takes longer than what you thought. There's lots of things we start where we think it'll only take a couple of minutes, so that's why we get it started. Then you realize this thing's going to take a lot longer, and it's like, oh, sorry, I've run out of energy. You know,
right, thanks.
I'll come back to this later.
That makes sense too.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk about some vulnerabilities, and I'm going to hit this instinct pretty hard, because I think there's a lot that plays out for the people around you, not just the effect on completers, but even on avoid complete people. And I think it's really worth understanding this if you at least stay with me for the next 3 minutes and they get bored and move on to the next thing. So one of them is the gap between intention and execution. You know, the avoid completes can say they're going to do things because that's like making the list. And then if you don't do it, it affects your own credibility. And in leadership, and we're all in a leadership position, meaning we're all, whether we're leading families or just, influencing friends or leading teams in business, credibility is everything. And if you say that you're intending to do something and you don't follow through and do it, you pay a massive price on your credibility. So that, and yet we can be at pains to want to have integrity and have the best values and operate with ethics and, all of the things that we would think are so important in leadership, and they are. And yet this gap between starting things or saying you're going to do things and not following through just completely screws your credibility. And I think that's really worth being aware of, not only the effect on other people who are sitting there waiting for you to follow through, but what it does to your own brand, and yet so many leaders are out there spending tens of thousands of dollars getting executive coaching to try and improve their brand and get promoted. And it's right under their nose, the very thing that's screwing their credibility the most, which is not following through. And I would just say to you, don't try and become better at follow through. Stop making the freaking promises. Just stop it. Stop telling people you're going to do all these things. And sometimes it slips out. Like if I remember leaving voicemails for people saying, oh, well, I'll give you a call back tomorrow, and just stop it right there and just say, well, actually, if you don't hear from me tomorrow, can you call me? You can always leave it so the ball's in someone else's court as well, and all of that pressure isn't on yourself. Or just don't make the promise. All right, the second thing is the underscoping. Because we think everything's going to take a short amount of time, but it always takes longer, what that does? That leads to burnout. It not only buggers up credibility, it leads to burnout of people, because we often put people into situations where we've made promises to others to get things done. We then delegate it to someone else to get it done. But when we've underscoped it, the pressure is now on them to try and get it done in the same timeline or with the same limited resources. And yet we've way underscoped it. And what I've found consistently is it's a factor of 3 to 4 times. So we're basically promising something to get done in 1/3 of the time that it's actually going to take, or we only give 1/3 of the resources of what's actually going to be required. And it looks so superficial to the people that we're delegating to or involving in what we're going to do. And what we should really be doing is making the promise of course we can help, you know, if there's a customer, for example, of course we can help you. Let me check with my team on how long this is actually going to take, and we'll get back to you and let you know what we can do. And honestly, whether the customer got it resolved today or in 2 days' time may not make any difference. But it's often our own instincts that are making these short-term promises. The client or the customer didn't need it or expect it. We did it ourselves because it's our instinct, and yet we put all this pressure on other people around us, and it makes you look inconsiderate. One of the things that I've got on my list is, how do other people really perceive you? And a lot of avoid completes, me too, are often thought of as really inconsiderate, because we put people into situations where now they're under pressure to get things done on timeframes that we promised, and yet they weren't a party to making that decision. And it looks reckless, it looks inconsiderate, and over time it really demeans the relationship. The other from a business leadership point of view, and I know there's a lot of business leaders and people in teams here on the call, but I think this would be true in any larger group of people, is the issue of alignment of work and alignment of behavior and so on. Because what happens is avoid completes will have a conversation with, say, their direct reports or with people closest to them. And then there's just an expectation that all of that will cascade out to other people, but it doesn't. It's an assumption in business that, well, if I talk to my people, they will go and share this with their people who will share it with their people, and it would all just keep going out from the center. And yet the dilution of that information is almost zero by the time it leaves your direct reports. Like if I had a message that went to my direct reports, and then I'm relying on them sharing with their next layer, the likelihood of that happening is basically zero. And yet the expectation is 100%. And in that gap is so much confusion and so much burnout that happens in almost every business team that we work with. And instead, if the assumption was, my direct reports are not going to communicate it, so I will communicate to all of those levels, and then I'll have some accountability mechanisms to make sure they've communicated as well. You can never get it wrong if you over communicate. But it's one of the biggest issues when we look at the inefficiency in teams that occur. It's mostly through a lack of alignment of the work. And in fact, I've worked with people who are 3 levels down from the boss, and they're working on work that's got nothing to do with the plan, the strategy, the priorities that the boss or the senior leadership team have actually carved out. And when I've shown the slides from the strategy meeting that we maybe were a party to, that group 3 layers down are like, well, what is this? We've never seen this. We know nothing about this. And when you show the work they're working on to the people upstairs, they're like, why are they doing that? It's like, well, because no one's communicated. There's this flow that goes through. No one's completed the communication. No one's followed it all the way through. No one's made sure that all parts of the puzzle are all getting the same type of messaging. So many people finish meetings and there's no thought about now, what's the conclusion of this meeting and how are we going to message this to all of our fan club out there, all of the rest of our employees, and just getting aligned in what that messaging is so that everyone hears the same song. I mean, business teams do not do this. And I would say if we've worked with, 500 teams, I might have found it 5 times where it's so rare. So if you are one of the people that do that, kudos to you, but it's very, very rare that a business meeting finishes by getting agreement on what is the message that we're going to go out and take to our people and how we're going to do that so that we all stay aligned.
Full scale here, one of the boards I'm on, we finish, our last thing is what we call cascading messages. And so what we do is we put out messages that go down to the rest of the team from the board. And so they know what we've done and they know what the expectations on them are. And it makes it very, very clear to everyone what's going to happen next. It takes 4 or 5 minutes at the end of a board meeting. It's really, really simple.
Great, Gail. Well, doing that is what I'm talking about, and you'd be one of the very, very few teams that do. So well done and keep it up. It makes such a difference to the people who aren't in the meeting, but who are a party to what's got to, happen afterwards. The other one is lack of appreciation. Because avoid completes are into the result, we don't really care so much about the effort that it takes to get the result. We just want the result. And there are people that bring us work that say they've spent all weekend working on it to get down to, say, a slide or an outcome, and they go, there you go, that's what you asked for. We can look really, well, very ungrateful, basically, you know, when we just see the result, but we don't think about or even understand what it took to get that result. And the person isn't always going to say, well, you know, I've spent all weekend working on this. And when we hear that they spent all weekend, we don't even hear it, because we just assume no one would spend that much time on anything, you know, because we do everything in 5 minutes. So we don't, but in our mind, we think 5 minutes. And so what comes across to people is, well, you've got no idea how much work I put into this. And not only that, you don't even care about it. And we care about the person, but we don't really put a lot onto the work. And if someone told us that and we knew it was true, you'd feel great appreciation, and you'd also feel terrible that you missed that. So I'd say to all of you, call that out, whether you're an avoid complete or not, because you could have put all weekend in on this, even if you were avoid complete, call it out. But know that the lack of attention is not because the person doesn't care. They just don't think in that currency. And in a team or even in a family, it really makes a difference. Like, for example, someone could have a birthday, right? And you make them a birthday cake, and you put all this effort into making the birthday cake. They might think, well, it only took an hour to make the birthday cake, but actually you were thinking of that cake a week before. You've been looking at recipes. You've done all this work to sort of figure out the cake that would really make the difference for them on their birthday. And then they just blow out the candles and say, thanks very much, I really appreciate you making the cake. And it's like, oh, did you know what it took to make that cake? You know? And I would commend the avoid completes to also stop and think about that. You know, that so many things that happen around you that look like they're only a moment, like the cake, there was so much work and effort that went into doing that, and so much prior thought. And we look so inconsiderate when we don't give any attention to that. And it's not who we are, it's not how we want to be, but it's how we come across when we just are focused so much on the result or the thing at the end. Okay. Hey, Jess, I just saw you got, oh my God, I'm doing life wrong. What are you referring to?
Just a little humor, but, you know, it's just blowing my mind, right? That people can think that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I'm one of them, and I'm not as bad as some of the people on this call. I'm not saying bad. I'm just taking the, you know, having some fun with it. But it is interesting how different we all are.
So, Paul, I have a question for you, because sometimes I find that people ask for something that they think is really small, but they don't realize all of the piece parts that have to be done to execute what sounds like it would be small and quick.
Yes.
And I don't think somebody like is trying to overload you, but just because they don't totally understand all of the things that actually have to be done. It's kind of like the duck looks all calm on the top of the water, but the legs are swimming underneath.
Correct.
So I think sometimes we fall into that trap.
Yes, and what's really cool to know, Cheryl, and I'm actually thinking of maybe the same person you might be thinking of with this, is when a person asks, you know, I need this done, or can you get this done? And they make it sound like it's, you know, it's only a few minutes, but it's a heap of work. They're not thinking about the heap of work. They're just thinking about, I need it done. And if they knew how much time and effort and resource it was going to take, they may even change their request. And until you scope it out and go back and share that with them, they don't know to change their request. So if I ask for somebody to put something together, in my mind, I'm probably thinking it's relatively quick. But if they came back and explained, you know, what you've just asked for is about a day's worth of time. I'm like, seriously? Well, maybe we've already on a different page. So explain what that is, because I thought it was like half an hour's work. And once I explain it, if I can see that it really is a lot longer than what I was anticipating, I'd be like, okay, let's not do that, you know? Or they might be thinking, you know, you've already given me a week's worth of work before, but an avoid complete, once you move on to the next thing, you've forgotten what you've given them before. So when you come out, we're not delegating new work, remembering what we've already delegated. You're just delegating the next thing. And you would then need to remind that person of, well, do you remember you've also given me these other things you want done? Do you still want all them done this week or today? Or does this now supersede that? And that will be a new conversation for that person, because they will have forgotten what they've already given you. And again, I think to Jess's point, it's just good to know that that's how people think, because the logic doesn't work with ID. You know, you've got to think through the lens of ID. The logic is, well, surely they would remember what they've already given me. Surely they know how long this is going to take, but they do not. They don't remember, and they don't scope it out. And until you go back and play both of those things out for them, they will likely change their mind. The number of things that, I'll just talk for myself as a 4 incomplete, the number of things I would ask for with absolute belief and conviction that I need those things, and I do, until someone tells me what it's going to take, or what's the trade-off that I wasn't thinking of, and instantaneously I'll change my expectations. And if that's true for me as a 4, it's like profoundly true for the 3s and the 2s and the 1s incomplete. Okay, in the interest of time, I'm just going to zoom along, guys, because there's some really important things I want to cover for you on the self-doubt side, and then stress, and then the genius piece. And we've got like 12 minutes. So self-doubt, there's 2 things I want to talk about here that I find to be common questions that avoid completes ask about themselves. One is around the C word, commitment. Can I ever really be committed? You know, like committed in a marriage? Have I got the tenacity to stay in a marriage? Have I got the tenacity to stay with a task? Have I got, you know, can I be committed in a role or committed in a friendship? Can I really do that? The short answer is yes, you can. And there are many avoid completes who are in marriages that have not just endured, but have thrived for decades, you know, or they've kept up traditions for years and years in their family. So you can stay with things for the longer haul. It's about what do you need in order for that to happen. But if you have a voice inside you that is saying, I think I have an issue with commitment, please know that that is not something you need to hold on to. There might be other needs that are missing for you, but you can absolutely be committed, and, you know, stay with anything you want to set your mind to for the longer haul, but you have certain needs that have to be in place in order to stay in that relationship or in that role. For example, you need to have variety, and, you know, to feel like that you're not trapped, and that there is freedom to move and, you know, breathe in that relationship or in that role. And where you can do that, I've had people who have taken roles on, like I'm thinking of this friend of mine at Cisco, and she said, well, I always move every 6 months. And the latest job she's been in, we spoke recently, is 13 years she's in the same role. And she said, Paul, I can't believe it. But the variety in this role and the fun I'm having and the freedom I've got to just do my own thing, it's sort of like I'm doing lots of different things anyway, but it's under the umbrella of the same role. And, you know, it is completely possible. The second voice that often comes up is I can't tell you how many people over almost 30 years of doing this as avoid completes have had with me the childbirth, what I call the childbirth conversation, which is, so is this why I can't remember the birth of my children? And I'm like, let's keep talking. Because the pain and the guilt that so many people are carrying, because particularly if they've got several children and they can remember one birth, but they can't remember the others, they feel so freaking guilty for years and years. And I'm talking about, I've had people, many people in tears where they get to this point where they're like, can I share something with you? And I almost know what they're going to ask me. You know, it's the childbirth conversation. And I can't remember the birth of this child or of, you know, all of my children. And they feel so guilty. And it's not because they weren't present. They often feel like, is it something to do with the connection? Because I do feel maybe I'm not as committed or as connected to that child. And maybe I wasn't as present. Maybe I was stressed at that time and I feel like cheated out that I missed it. I'm like, no, you were fully there. You were fully present in the moment. You were probably freaking wonderful to your spouse and you know, everything was amazing. But with your ID, you know, you move on. And if you had photos at that moment, you could go back and the photos might remind you, but you just recall it instantaneously. It's just not the way you're wired. And not only is that not the way you're wired, there are, you know, hundreds and thousands of people who have exactly the same feeling. So you're not wrong, you're not abnormal, and you're no longer guilty. So please let go of it. And if that's relevant to any of you on this call, I would spend whatever time was needed to help you work through that. I think it's a horrible burden to carry, but just know that there are many people that with an avoid complete drive carry the same thing. And if you are an avoid complete and you happen to have remembered, you know, all of the births and even vividly, like, good on you. It doesn't mean you can't, but there are just many people who have had that experience. And I just want to call it out. And whether it's the lack of memory of a child, you know, being born, or whether it's just other important occasions, you know, they can't remember all the detail of when they got married, you know, and because they can't remember the detail, it causes conflict in the marriage because the other partner can. And it just seems like they're careless and inconsiderate and forgetful, and it just doesn't fit with that drive, you know. So be kind to yourself about that. There are many people with the same ID that face exactly the same situation. What causes you stress? Actually, very little. This is probably the least stress drive because you focus on whatever you're in the middle of. And if something happened an hour ago that was really, you know, troublesome, and now you've moved on to the next thing, and that's, you know, you've moved on. So you don't tend to bring all that baggage with you. The avoid completes tend to be very, you know, don't carry a whole lot of stress, but there are a couple of things that are probably worth calling out. One of them is red tape. Nothing riles an avoid complete person more than red tape. You know, when rules where you've just got to follow these friggin' rules because that's the way we always do it here, and there's no other real sensibility to it, that drives them nuts. And that is like waving a red flag to the bull in terms of what, you know, causing them to be defined. But when you feel trapped and you have to follow the red tape, and there's no other way around that, and it blocks you from being able to achieve goals that you know are important, that can be a source of stress to the avoid complete person. And the other is that phrase of this, you know, this is the way we've always done it here, and there's this resistance to change or resistance to improvement because this is the way we've always done it, and they're just, you know, digging their heels in. That can be very, very frustrating. But again, once you move on to the next thing, you tend to be in that new moment and not absorbed by the stress and pressure of whatever, you know, was happening beforehand. So it's not a big one for stress. It's very rare for me that I'd find an avoid complete person stressed. And if there was, it would just be something we could deal with pretty quickly and move on. It doesn't tend to be carrying with them over, you know, weeks, months, and years. As far as a strategy to be effective, I would just call out a couple of things. I mentioned before about getting clear on non-negotiables. But one of the things I would challenge you to do is think of the one thing. How do you boil everything down to one thing? What I would call an acupuncture point. Like if there's 5 things that you want an avoid complete person to do, think of the one thing that if they did the one thing, that would make everything else start to happen. And it might be as simple as a phone call, but it's got to be something that's fast to do and easy to do. And if you can just get that little, it's like lighting the end of a fuse. If you can help them light the end of the fuse, the rest of it starts to play out. So focusing on the one thing. It's like off that movie, The City Slickers, you know, trying to find the meaning of life. And he goes, oh, it's one thing. And he goes, but what's the one thing? You know, and the key is it's different for every person, but it's one thing. Find the one thing. That's the best way to instigate action for the avoid completes. All right, so down to the geniusness of this drive. In the past, I've talked about white belt and black belt levels of geniusness, and I'll be candid with you. I'm not sure that we've got this entirely nailed yet. I've been playing with it all week, and I think there's a little more to it, but I'm going to share a couple of things with you in case some of you might be able to help uncover the rest of this as well. I think at the white belt level, this one I feel pretty confident about. I think the geniusness is around the willingness to experiment and pioneer. And what you take for granted, and see as logical, is just having a go. You know, I didn't have the training, I don't have the instructions, I don't have the time, but at least got something started and, you know, breathed it into life. that willingness to experiment. There's a lot of people around you that they see it as courageous. They see it as you lacking fear. They wouldn't have been willing to start because they couldn't see where to start. They didn't have all the instructions. They didn't have the time. They didn't know what to do. But you're like, well, what if we just try this? And that sense of the willingness to experiment is something you may take for granted about yourself, but there's many other people around you who probably look at you in awe going, wow, I know it sounds so simple, but it just didn't occur to me to even try that, you know? Like how many times when something's broken and people don't know how to fix it and you don't either, but you're willing to have a go at it and you go, well, what if we just try this, and you just play with it. Next thing you fixed it, then they'll say to you, well, how'd you do it? And you're like, I don't know how I did it, but anyway, it's working now, you know? But the willingness to just have a go is something that really stands out to many people around you. And I like the simplicity of that. And I call it white belt because it's so easy to see it as, well, it's common sense. It was nothing really, but to me, everyone else around you, it was actually the thing that made the difference. When I think about the black belt level, you know, I think when I look at what Avoid Completes do that really could be super impactful, it's been the catalyst for transformational change. They're the people, when everyone else can be talking about it, planning for it, trying to find a nice way to go about it. And it's the Avoid Complete that will often throw the cat in amongst the pigeons and do the thing that provokes not just incremental change, but transformational change. And they'll just do one thing, but they'll take it to the point of no, by doing that thing, it causes change to the point of no return. So it doesn't mean you finish the change, but you've at least changed the normal. You've changed the history. You've changed where things are at. And now it has to change because you've provoked something that is going to be transformational. And I want to articulate that better. But it's like knowing what was of all the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, there's one piece. If we hit that piece, it changes everything. Knowing what that piece was, and it's not even prior knowledge, it's like instinctive within the Avoid Complete mind, but it's like knowing that if we do step 17 is going to change everything. And then bugger me, they go and change step 17. And it's like, but we weren't ready for 17. Or, you know, it's like, yeah, I know, but there's no going back now. And, you know, that provocative change agent piece, and it's not based on courage. It's not based on having a plan. It's not based on knowledge and experience. It's just instinctive to go, well, you wanted to see change happen, so let's do this. And that piece upsets the whole apple cart, but it drives the change that everyone else might have been talking about, but would never have otherwise happened. There's something in that realm that is the hallmark of the Avoid Complete drive. And that's why so many of them are thought of as great change agents. And it's not that they're necessarily good at implementing the change. So often it's that they're the people that make the change. Like they throw the cat in amongst the pigeons. They provoke the change that others then will say, we have to clean it all up. Yeah, but if they didn't do that first piece, you would never have made the changes. It doesn't mean it's going to be pretty, but the point is it'll happen.
Well, I sum that up as being a catalyst because
yes,
I can relate to that. And I always say to people, I'm the catalyst to help you just get these things.
Yes,
right.
That's exactly right, Tarek. But it doesn't, I want a way of messaging it that honors the significance of that particular geniusness,
absolutely.
You know. It's so powerful in what it does for provoking change and transformation, more the point, in families, in relationships, and in business. And in health, you know, I've got people on the call in healthcare, and you know, these are the people that will provoke the change in someone's health journey. Saying that, it could be as simple as saying something to someone that no one else was going to say. Everyone else has thought it, but no one else would say it, and they'll say it to provoke the change. Not they're saying it as the authenticator to be candid. They're saying it to provoke the change, and often it's not intentional. It's just instinctive.
Yeah,
so guys, I know we're well out of time. I look forward to how
you word it. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
I look forward to how you put this forward because...
yeah, I'm going to keep working it, and I will message it to you. The fact you've been on the call, we know that, and we will send you an update if any developments come from, you know, this genius piece. I think it's there's a little unfinished work here I want to keep working on. So anyway, we will get there. But thanks for being on the call today. Next week, we get into the improvised instinct. I look forward to seeing you on that call. And then we'll share with you what we're planning beyond this series as well. Once we get past the next 2 weeks, we've got some new webinars planned I think you'll really enjoy as well. Have a great day, guys. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
All the best.
Paul, thank you so much. It gets just better and better every time. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome, Craig.
Bye-bye.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here. Bye-bye.